The Supreme Court allows Texas to enforce immigration laws, or does it? The New York Post whitewashes Biden related fraud. Trump may cash in just in time, and more. The Monica Perez Show starts now. Welcome. Happy to have you here. If you want to watch the show live and participate in the chat, go to YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin, Facebook, Twitter, every place at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And you can find the show there in its entirety commercial free if you're watching live. And you can also get it in its entirety commercial free on iTunes Premium for just the price of a newspaper. Buy me a newspaper once a month and you get all of my content commercial free. So that'd be great. All right, so let's get to our first story, first headline of the day. It's not a headline. It's just I heard a lot of different reports on Fox News today about the Biden, I guess it's an impeachment hearing or investigation in the House. It's not actually an impeachment. They're deciding whether to impeach him. It seems the reports are that it seems to be fizzling out. I have followed this exactly zero until this moment. I have made no comment. I haven't looked into it, nothing. But I heard a couple of things today that just both made me laugh and made me mad. So let's just get into this. If you've been listening to me for a while, you know I've done a lot of work on the corruption of, well, really investigation, like reading and digging stuff out on the corruption of the Bidens from Ukraine to China and places in between. Peter Schweitzer has at least one, if not two or more, books out that get into this, the details a lot. So I don't have those books, but I kind of want to get them. But if you want to look into it deeper, I think you can find it with him. But there's plenty just out there that you can find on your own. And I used to dig into the Hunter Biden stuff in Ukraine because it made me nuts that everyone was talking about it, like he's drawing a salary for sitting on a board in a country he's never been to or something like that. I'm like, that's not the problem. The problem is that he and his buddies, they have this financial consortium. It's him, James Bulger III, the son of the state senator of Massachusetts and the nephew of Whitey Bulger, the FBI informant murdering organized crimester. The Chris Hines, who's John Kerry's stepson, and this was during the time that Biden was vice president and Kerry was secretary of state, and they were arranging IMF loans to go through Ukraine. Devin Archer, who will come up again. You don't really know him except for he sat on the board of Burisma with Hunter Biden. He's in this financial consortium. Then I also found some stuff on Jim Biden, Joe's brother. And the idea is when you look into the IMF money, it just flows. It gets complicated. You can listen to my old work on it if you can find it. You can probably search for it on monicaperezshow.com. Hopefully it's there. But in any case, we're talking millions, hundreds of millions. Schweitzer puts the number at possibly $1 billion if you include all the China stuff. So for me, there is so much corruption there. It's absolutely shocking. But when you hear the details, you kind of see how it works just a little bit. You have to see them as examples of a pattern. So a few things that I heard in the news today that kind of raised flags for me because I was familiar with some of the topics was this Tony Bobulinski, whom I kind of just shrugged off because he was on Tucker and he was on Fox. And I'm like, you know what? Anybody getting that kind of press probably doesn't have any real dirt. But there was one, but he seems like the real deal to me. And I read an email he sent. It didn't have much in it, but it basically said to a potential Chinese partner, financial partner, it said, here are a list of all the politicians from, I think it was like Kamala Harris, who's the governor of California? I live in California. Gavin Newsom. Like there's a bunch of people on there that whose names you would recognize. And it says, these are the politicians, and this is the amount of money that they control in infrastructure spending that could go to a deal if you do a deal with us. So it was as close to an outright express statement of influence peddling that I've ever seen. And you could, I'm sure, find it. It's in one of my show notes somewhere. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes for this if I can put my finger on it easily. He testified yesterday. I don't know what he said yesterday, but I know when I hear him, like, that guy does have the dirt. I don't know if they really want to hear all that dirt. They should read that email into the hearings. There was another, this was just funny. This was another person who testified, I think yesterday, was Lev Parnas, who's supposedly a Giuliani associate. And he was, I mean, I don't think there's any dispute about that. So he gets on the clip I heard on Fox was, he said, yeah, Giuliani paid me to travel around the world to dig up dirt on the Bidens so that various media outlets could push disinformation and smear the Bidens. And I'm thinking, which is it? Is it disinformation or is it dirt that you dug up? And it totally reminded me of the first scene in Old School. See that movie with Luke Wilson and Juliette Lewis? So he's supposed to be on a business trip, but he comes home like he misses flight or something. I can't remember. And in his house is Juliette Lewis's girlfriend who lives with is having a gangbang. It's like very, voluntary and everything. Like there's advertised. People keep showing up. And he's just shocked and horrified. And she's in the kitchen in like a little robe or whatever. She's super stressed out and she's smoking a cigarette. And he says, Tell me the truth. Tell me this has never happened before. And she says, well, what do you want me to do? Tell you the truth? Or tell you it's never happened before? I was like, come on, Lev. What are you saying? Is it dirt or is it disinformation? So I thought that was like very funny. But there was something else when I heard they said they were waiting for Devin Archer, but Devin Archer declined to testify. And I looked into that because he was a real focus of stuff that I was, when I was finding about this influence peddling. So the deal with Devin Archer, he's one of these guys in the consortium. He sat on the board of Burisma with Hunter. He's always there with Hunter. And he seems to have no other reason to be there. The other guys are very well connected, but he didn't really seem that. And he was involved in a big scandal, a major fraud thing where numerous people were convicted. I believe Sugarman, the boss of Heidi Plank, the woman who disappeared in California, I think it was a couple of years ago, very fishy story. He was involved in this, and I'm almost positive he was convicted. And Devin Archer, all of his co-conspirators, I guess they pled, but maybe one of them went to trial. He went to trial, and he was convicted by a jury of these crimes that people were going to jail for years for. And the judge overturned the jury's conviction, saying that's unbelievable. This innocent man will go to jail, even though everybody else was convicted or plead out. There were having to remit tens of millions of dollars because they defrauded an American Indian tribe. I forget the name of it, of tens of millions of dollars of bond money. And it was in one of these papers that he used Hunter Biden's name and his association with Hunter Biden to gain the trust of these people. So it wasn't totally unrelated, like it's described in most media reports of the story. So the judge was Ronnie Abrams, whose husband was number 2 under Robert Mueller in the Russia investigation. She still plays a role in this. So she overturned the conviction, and then there was I don't know how this even works, but the government got to appeal that, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court because this guy did not want to go to jail. This was a 2018 case, went all the way up to the Supreme Court. I think it finally got to the Supreme Court last year, and they overturned her negation of that jury trial, and he's supposed to go to jail. He's still not in jail. He's still appealing. It's still bouncing it around. And what really horrified me the latest horror was that the New York Post, and I think Fox News did the same thing. I think Maria Bartiromo, or whatever her name is, I think she was echoing these sentiments that to what lengths will Democrats go to prevent Devin Archer from testifying? Now they want to put him in jail. But he belongs in jail. He should have been in jail 5 years ago. He should be out by now, actually. He was only sentenced to 1 lousy year when other people went for years. And so I think that guy might really literally not end up in jail because the Republicans are making it look like the Democrats have a witch hunt against him, which is just such an inversion. It's crazy. So that is, and it's hard to get updates on this guy's story. Another thing that I had found that I never hear anyone talk about, a really big, should have been a really famous scandal, but it really demonstrates how the corrupt bedfellows of the Bidens. And so when people are like Hunter is in this up to his elbow, Hunter was incompetent. He was a drug addict. I mean, self admitted, like read his biography, whatever. He was a drug addict. He is not the mastermind of international schemes of corruption totaling the billions of dollars. He's a beard. He's a beard. And so does his Uncle Jim, Joe's brother. That is my informed opinion. I mean, I don't know how you can deny it given public reports, but make your own decision about it. So what was my smoking gun on Jim and Hunter and exactly how this works is this. I'll just read it from a 2009 article. There are no updates to this article. This was in Reuters and the Wall Street Journal in 2009. It says a fund of hedge funds run by two members of U.S. Vice President Joe Biden's family was marketed exclusively by firms controlled by Texas financier Alan Stanford, charged by regulators with an $8 billion fraud. I believe he was the second biggest fraudster in American history next to Bernie Madoff. This is how close they were. The $50 million fund was jointly branded between the Biden's Paradigm Global Advisors and a Stanford Financial Group entity and was known as the Paradigm Stanford Capital Management Core Alternative Fund, the paper said. Paradigm Global Advisors is owned through a holding company by the vice president's son, Hunter, and Joe Biden's brother, James, according to the Wall Street Journal. So they have this. So on the one hand, Devin Archer and all of those guys were fraudsters. They're Hunter's running buddies. And on this, the biggest fraudster in history was a full-on partner in a joint venture during his fraud years with Jim and Hunter. I just don't know how they're getting around finding corruption here. Anyway. So you see how like the New York Post is setting up this twisted thing of how Devin Archer, they want him to go to jail so he doesn't testify against the Biden. So crazy. There's another thing that might be, this really seems crazy to me, but I've been wondering what is the thing about this $400 million payment that Trump has to make that I wouldn't be surprised if it's the totality of his net worth. I don't think he can pay it. No wonder he can't get a bond for it. But they seem to be pressing it. I'm like, why? Why are they doing this? It makes no, there's an angle here. What's the angle? I think there's a chance this is the angle. So I read this article. I think this was today. I think this is the Wall Street Journal. It could have been today. Here's the headline, and you tell me what you think. Trump is in line for a $3.5 billion windfall from his stake in Truth Social. Supporters who have driven up share price are expected to vote Friday to take the company public. So they're driving up the share price because they love him, is the implication here. So let me just read you these lines so I don't get it wrong. Trump's winning lottery ticket would come from Truth Social, the social media platform he launched in 2021. After a twisted path that included tens of millions of dollars in losses and insider trading convictions, the shell company taking Truth Social public became the market's latest meme stock. Trump's supporters banded together to push up the stock, valuing Truth Social to a staggering $6 billion. And here's where it gets interesting. Truth Social could go public as soon as next week, but the deal still needs to be approved by shareholders. Even if that happens, Trump must hold his shares for 6 months. How much you want to bet? I mean, I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but I wouldn't be surprised if Trump makes an appeal to whatever authority might have the authority to grant such an appeal. Maybe it would just be a shareholder vote, which he would definitely win, allowing him to sell his stock so that he could pay that fine. And see, with a stock like that, it's a meme stock or a bubble or whatever, you bear a lot of risk. It's $6 billion today, but if he loses the election or something happens, it could be nothing tomorrow. I actually know somebody who was in a freeze like that. He had done a little tech startup. He was worth $60 million. And he just watched that thing go zzz because he wasn't allowed to sell it. I had a friend who said he should have shorted the comps, short the comps, so that like if the whole industry tanks, at least you have these options that give you some money. I don't know if maybe he wasn't even allowed to do that. It's kind of expensive to have a short out there for a long time, but it was more expensive to watch his $60 million go down to, I think, nothing. But this would be, I mean, a scheme of, intertemporal proportions, like a multi-year scheme. If this were that, but if he sells that stock early, I'm going to say, told you so. Oops. Okay. So that I thought was interesting. Another thing I found quite interesting in the news today, something I've been talking about recently, which is I feel like the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is not only being literally made worse, but also in the news, like the propaganda about it is being amplified because it's our excuse. It's our back door to boots on the ground there. We're already building a port offshore, which we probably would want anyway, because it's deeper than the port of Gaza from what I've read. And we just want an excuse to get in there and distribute the aid. If you've heard my last show or last couple of shows, you know what I'm talking about. And Israel's making just it's just a debacle when Israel tries to actually kill people trying to distribute aid. They're just totally incompetent when it comes to distributing aid. So this was a Wall Street Journal headline today saying, oh, dang, I accidentally erased the headline. Let me see if I can find it. It's really shocking. Here it is. This headline's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous headline. Listen to the headline. Israelis craft secret plan to put anti-Hamas Palestinians in charge of Gaza aid. It's a secret plan. I'm reading it, the headline in the Wall Street Journal. I didn't, this reminds me of something I left out in the last story, that Lev Parnas said that he did not find any dirt on so I just wanted to correct the record. Like, he did say he did not find any dirt. And I'm laughing at that too, because I'm like, I found the dirt. I didn't even travel the globe. I found the dirt. So, okay. So here is a secret plan that is a headline on the Wall Street. It's actually on the front page of the Wall Street Journal today. It says the effort faces vehement opposition from Hamas while also dividing Israel's leadership. So the bad guys hate it, which means it's a good idea. But the article actually goes through, like, I mean, they are definitely saying the quiet part out loud. It says the aid would enter by land and sea after Israeli inspection and would head to large warehouses in central Gaza, where Palestinians would then distribute it, the officials said. When the war is over, the people in charge of the aid, the Palestinians in charge of the aid, would assume authority to govern, backed up by security forces funded by wealthy Arab governments, the officials said. So the idea is they are going to get Palestinians who are not involved with Hamas, who are prominent businessmen or other things like that. They're going to get the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to, I wonder if it really is a kingdom. That sounds like a propaganda term. Okay, Saudi Arabia to, I mean, they call it that, but of course they would. So to support it and finance it. And it says, like, all over this, that those people would be poised to take over. And for me, that's what I think they would call white propaganda of the deed, or maybe that's gray or black. I think it's black propaganda. So, and psyops, white, black, and gray are white is when the person who's giving it to you, like US soldiers giving out chocolate to French children when they liberated Paris or whatever. That's white propaganda of the deed, or white psychological operation, where you know who it is. Leaflets coming from like an airplane that you can't see would be gray propaganda. You don't know who it's from. And black propaganda is what like false flags are. So the actual actor is somebody different. So here they have Palestinians giving out aid. They're giving out the chocolate to the kids. And who is behind it? Saudi Arabia, Israel, the US. Who do the people think are behind? They know who's providing the aid, but who are those Palestinian faces are faces of what? So you can call it however you want, but the fact is this is the next level of the humanitarian boots on the ground backdoor that I was talking about previously, which is they're actually drawing a straight line from the humanitarian aid to who will rule Gaza after the devastation is finished. And that's, I mean, it's obviously the plan. And I knew when they were talking about a two-state solution from the beginning, Blinken and Biden and stuff, that's where they were headed. And it seems like this is definitely what that is. But there was an article on Monday, I think, or Tuesday, where the EU, there's just a little teeny thing in the newspaper. It said the EU signs a deal to provide $8 billion in aid to Egypt. And there are two things about this that I thought were pretty worthy of note. The aid aims to promote democracy, fundamental freedoms, human rights, and gender equality. Okay. So, in that place, equality might be, tax the rich, feed the poor till there are no rich no more. Like equality is not always the best way to go. And if I were married to a rich guy, I would rather have that kind of equality than have him also be as destitute as I am. So, but that's not the really interesting part. That's just the obvious part. The really interesting part is the money will assist Egypt. This is actually inhumane, in my opinion, to fortify its border, especially with Libya, against migrants fleeing poverty and conflict from Gaza. So they don't want those people getting out. They want that humanitarian crisis to max out so that they can put all the pieces in place under the guise of humanitarian aid. And then after it's all set and they're all locked up again, then they might let some people out who are pissed and know who was behind it all. That might happen. That'll be that critical immigration theory. But for now, it's a cauldron. And that's the EU is making sure that Egypt is not a relief valve. That seems to be how stuff's working these days. Here's another interesting tidbit. Now, I got a hat tip to Bobby and to Robin Minotti on Twitter, who said this about the Pope, and I'm not sure if it was in the Pope's memoirs. The only thing I can find from the Pope right now are his memoirs. But the tweet says, Pope Francis denounces anti-vaxxers, calling jab refusal an almost suicidal act of denial. He rebuked those who did not receive an injection or who voiced opposition to them, saying, deciding whether to get vaccinated is always an ethical choice, but I know that many people signed up to movements opposed to the administration of the medication. This distressed me because, in my view, being against the antidote is an almost suicidal act of denial. He made a thinly veiled condemnation of other bishops, Raymond Burke, for example. He said the grim scenario of lockdowns began to change with the arrival of the first vaccines. Of course, he didn't say anything about the grim scenario that unrolled after it. Anyway, he said he opined that a generalized fear was created when superficial explanations of how the vaccines worked spoke of injections of the virus into the body. There were also you should be so lucky. There were also claims there was nothing but water in the vials. Again, we should be so lucky. Some people even stated publicly that microchips were being implanted in people. I don't know what to tell you. It could be true. I don't know. How would we ever know? We can't know anything. He said it created confusion and panic. For him to say stuff like that bothers me because there is a thing called, I think it was called Dignitas Personae. that I used in my request for exemptions for my family instead of the abortion argument. They said like aborted cells were in there, which is a totally valid argument. I mean, you have to have the consent of the body to be used in posthumous experiments, and the person who killed you cannot, that would be a pretty basic legal tenet, cannot give permission. So if there were aborted cells in there, it would be an unpermitted use of the remains of a person for scientific purposes, and absolutely cannot be, unless it was a spontaneous abortion, like a miscarriage, that would be okay, I think. Maybe not, though. You might actually have to get prior consent, which would not be possible for an unborn person. But to the extent it's gene therapy, which it was, or that was the one I was talking about, I will read this. This is straight out of Dignitas Personae. For a moral evaluation, the following distinctions need to be kept in mind. Procedures used on somatic cells, and I believe that means like non-gametes, like not sex cells, for strictly therapeutic purposes are in principle morally licit. Can someone check that? What is somatic cell? Such actions seek to restore the normal genetic configuration of the patient or to counter damage caused by genetic anomalies or those related to other pathologies. So it has to be under those circumstances where you're trying to correct something that's wrong. Given that gene therapy can involve significant risks for the patient, the ethical principle must be observed according to which, in order to proceed to a therapeutic intervention, it is necessary to establish beforehand that the person being treated will not be exposed to risks to his health or physical integrity, which are excessive or disproportionate to the gravity of the pathology for which a cure is sought. It doesn't say anything about prevention. The informed consent of the patient or his legitimate representative is also required. So you would have to understand the risks, understand the illness that you're suffering from, and get full consent, none of which was true in the case of the vaccine when I was writing that letter anyway. Okay, so Rita May says somatic cells in the body other than sperm and egg cells, which are germ cells, right? And human somatic cells are diploid, meaning they contain two sets of chromosomes, one inherited from the mother and one inherited from the father. Thank you so much. That was super, super helpful. Okay. So just wanted to point that out. It's like maybe it's information that's going into the memory hole. Wanted to reiterate that. But the reason I picked up that story is because there was another related story, which I thought was funny. Not funny, bad, but just worthy of mention. Bolsonaro, the Trump type president of Brazil. So there's this like Trump template or, people with crazy hair and are like, I'm not going to say conservative. I don't even know what they are. They're kind of right-wing populists, I would say. But then you've got the libertarian populists like in Argentina and whatever the heck the Ecuador guy is, like, I don't know, deep state populist. I don't know. That reminds me, I was talking to Stella, whom you might know from the Propaganda Report Discord, Union of the Unknowns, WTF, actually quite a few things. She's our lovely Aussie, very lovely. And we were talking about the Arctic and the Antarctic, and she said, well, if they're telling you to look at the Arctic and the Antarctic, look at the equator. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so much going on there right now. Ecuador specifically. So thanks for that little tip. But yeah, that's one of the things that's going on. Anyway, he was, I don't know if he was arrested or just being investigated. He was accused of falsifying vax records for himself, his daughter, and others prior to the U.S. trip. And his defense attorney or representative says, well, why would he do that? As a dignitary, he was exempt from those requirements. Like, that just makes me nuts. It's like, are these microbes elitists? Is there something about it's not that bad I'd be honored to get Bolsonaro's COVID? Like, it's just, I mean, I don't believe in any of that stuff, obviously, but it's just, I like internal logic. Why was he exempted from that rule? Anyway, but it's funny because not only is he like created in the pattern of Trump, like I think these people are created persons, but they're even using the same, theatrical devices against him, which include, I'll just read straight from the article. Brazil's top electoral court has already ruled Bolsonaro ineligible to run for office until 2030 on the grounds that he abused his power during the 2022 campaign and cast unfounded doubts on the country's electronic voting system. My guess is they're totally founded, and this was an opportunity for them to make it basically illegal to cast such doubts. Anyway, it says he's got under other investigations, which include one seeking to determine whether he tried to sneak 2 sets of expensive diamond jewelry into Brazil and prevent them from being incorporated into the president's public collection. I don't know anything about that. Another relates to his alleged involvement in the January 8th, not January 6th, January 8th, 2023, not 2021, uprising in the capital of Brasilia soon after Lula took power. That's the left-wing guy who took his place and was previously in office, and he had his own corruption thing. Okay. The uprising resembled the Capitol riot in Washington 2 years prior, but he has denied wrongdoing in both cases. I just, they come up with nothing original. I don't know if they're toying with us or what, but anyway, let's get to a few comments. Then I have a couple more stories, and then I have a clip. Okay. Do we have any comments? That's not a big. Yes, I have a Rumble channel. I do have a Rumble channel. Let me see if I can. It's Rumble. I mean, it's Monica Perez show on Rumble, but could the URL be rumble.com/user/Monica Perez show? That doesn't seem right. But let me see if I can. Can you give me a second? Sorry, delay of game, I know. Let me find it. Of course, I've got like 10 things running on this computer, which is why it will not search quickly. Your mother. This is super annoying. All right, I can't do it. Well, you can be assured that the Rumble link will be in my website, monicaperezshow.com. It's also in the link tree, Monica Perez Show link tree, which you can get to through at Monica Perez Show on Twitter. But yes, it can be hard to find. Yes, that's true. I seem to recall that myself. Woodstock None says nothing about the Gaza thing is genuine. They clearly have a plan for that region. I think that's probably true. Oh, Knights of the Storm found the Rumble channel. So thank you so much for that. Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, Knights of the Storm. Little shout out there. Okay. So thank you for your help. And I'm going to hit a couple of more stories, and then I want to play a clip. And so for people listening at home, when I play the clips, I stick around, and it's an opportunity for me to get into the chat and chat with people. Right now, it's only on YouTube. I really don't know how to chat in more than one place at the same time. I guess I could just open a bunch of browsers, but right now it's just chatting on YouTube, and I'm pulling up some comments that we have about the clip being played. So if you're listening on the podcast, the clips speak for themselves. But if you want to watch, you can see that. And if you join live, we can chat with each other. All right. So, before I get to the next story, first of all, I would like to give a shout out to my to World Down Syndrome Day. It's 3/21, as in trisomy 21, which is cute. So my firstborn child has Down syndrome. And here's something funny. I decided he wanted to go to a movie, so I wanted to do a little treat for him. So I took him to a movie last night. And he picked Arthur the King. And I was so excited because I love The Last Kingdom. Knights of the Storm reminded me that. The nun, Woodstock nun, because the picture looks like maybe it's, I don't know. I can see like a foggy picture of a nun, which reminded me of Last Kingdom. There's a nun in Last Kingdom. And it's about the beginning of like 1,000 years ago, the beginning of the English, I'm going to say empire, but whatever, the United Kingdom. And so I thought it was about, King Arthur. So excited because I love that stuff, even if it's a popular movie. Well, I don't read blurbs. I don't watch trailers. Nothing. I want to know nothing. I don't even want to know who the actor is. I'll just watch it. It's not about King Arthur. It's about a dog named Arthur. and an adventure team trekking in the Dominican Republic. And boy, was I surprised. I would never have agreed to go to that movie if I had known it was like a feel good movie, which of course, feel good movies just make you cry, which is annoying anyway. I think it actually was a good movie. I enjoyed it, but against my will, against my will, do I enjoy that? All right. So, a couple more stories we have here. One is, oh, the Texas border case. Oh my gosh. This one is confusing. I had to read these articles like 3 times and I'm still not sure I know the ins and outs, but I'm going to tell you what I do know. There's a law in Texas, SB 4, that says that if an illegal immigrant is caught entering not through an official federal checkpoint, the Texas authorities have the right to deport them. And Mexico said, we're not taking any of them because they don't let people across their border. So they can send them to jail, a new alternative, which of course is costly. Well, one of the lower courts, this was challenged on constitutional grounds. Does the federal government have the sole authority to enforce any kind of border policy? And to me, it should be the exact opposite. Texas is has the castle doctrine, which every private property should have, which is if you cross the line on if you're a trespasser, they have the right to shoot you. So when I first moved to Texas, my husband said, if you have beef with somebody, don't walk up their driveway. I was like, okay, I won't. And I can have beef, but I won't. And but like, for me, if your neighbor walks on your land, if you have a border property with Arizona or Louisiana or Mexico and somebody walks on your land, you have the right. Why should you have less of a right to defend it than you would if it was, and they probably don't. However, now they have like buffer zones. So I had a friend whose property actually abuts the Rio Grande, and there isn't a buffer zone besides the Rio. But he said he used to be able to go to the river, but I've told this story many times. But he said that the drug cartels have people in perches and they just shoot people who are not one of theirs, like because they want to enforce their cartel and their import export operation. So I don't think the castle doctrine denies the immigrants, but it says that immigrants aren't part of that, but it just isn't relevant because they're locking up the border. So it's only the ins and outs are only federal, or they're building buffer zones or whatever. And I just don't think they should do that. I don't like the walls. I think that's just terrible for nature. And but there's a perfect example. And what would happen is, like, if they let them enforce this law that if you cross not at a checkpoint in Texas, you will be arrested or deported. And Texas has already spent $11 billion on their efforts to secure the border, including shipping people to other cities, which I think is a total subversion. Like, they're bringing immigrants into places that wouldn't have them. And then there'll be no place left that doesn't have culture clash. Anyway, so if they started doing that, if they enforced it, people would just stop crossing there because it would be hopeless, because Texas will actually, in good faith, I assume at this point, try to stop it. And I think Arizona has something like this cooking too. Now, there is a case from 2012 called Arizona versus the US that would probably have to be overturned for this law to stand. But that's possible. But what the Supreme Court ruled on was not whether or not it was constitutional. That's coming. But whether the lower courts could allow or deny Texas from enforcing it while the constitutional issue was being adjudicated. And from what I can gather, the Supreme Court said, yes, the lower courts can make that choice. So now the lower courts feels like they're back to vying for it. But as of this broadcast, Texas is not being permitted to enforce that law. And these are those laws where I'm like, let them enforce them during this time while you're checking it out. And let's actually see the impact, because that's information and you might as well get the information. Okay. Last story, then we'll get to the clip. In New Hampshire, a man named William Kelly, 28, charged in the death of Christine Falzone, whom he was living with, and her fetus, which was possibly his child, her unborn child, of 35 to 37 weeks gestation. He killed her and the baby at 35. Think about that. My son, who I just talked about, the one who has Down syndrome, my firstborn son, he was born at 34 weeks, I think. Yeah. And he was 6 pounds and he didn't need oxygen or anything. And he had Down syndrome. He had a brain less than 3% the size of a normal brain. I mean, there wasn't a lot going on there. And yet he could breathe and eat on his own, younger than that, and was 6 pounds. Anyway, he was New Hampshire, this guy, William Kelly. It's just, and the woman, 33-year-old woman. He's the first person in New Hampshire ever charged with murder in the death of a fetus. And I remember when I was young, I'm reading headlines. I'm not calling this baby fetus. I remember when I was young hearing that people were charged with murder because it happened in New York kind of on the regular. Hearing that people were charged with murder for the death of an unborn child. And I was like, how can they have that and still allow abortion? And if there's like a week's cutoff, I can understand. It's like 15 weeks before or after, whatever. But are you allowed to give somebody else an abortion at 14 weeks and not be charged with anything? Like if the mother is not consenting, like it gets very muddied. I always say, like, when in doubt, like consider it a human being you're not allowed to murder. That's like whether they're slaves, colonial, like they have a soul, they're a human being. If you're not sure, count it as a human being. If they might someday be a human being, like count it as a human being. Anyway, I don't recall them. It didn't explain in the article, but my assumption is that the reason this is the first time that anyone has ever been charged with murder in the death of a fetus in New Hampshire is that it's the first time it's happened. In some of these states, like Vermont, has almost no murder. And by the way, it has, I believe, some of, if not the most liberal gun laws in the country. And hopefully, I don't want to alert anybody to that because I don't want them to change it. I'm sure they are already in the crosshairs, and I do worry for Vermont because the way they overturn these things tends to be with, false flags. Anyway, just thinking of that. All right, let us. I want to give a shout out to True Hemp Science. I tried Hypnautica. I loved it. And it's my favorite kind because it's an emulsion, so you can drop it into water and drink it. The other stuff you put under your tongue. I like the gummies, I like the cookies, I like the brownies, I like to have the sensual experience. And it was great. I kind of underdo it. I don't always like do the max number of drops, but I just love it. It really helps my sleep. And actually, I got several samples from my friend Chris. And maybe I'll try the other ones. Maybe we'll have rolling offers. This right now, he's got an offer for the first 100 customers. So I don't know if that's used up or not, but if I say it, I'm sure he'll honor it. If you use the promo code Monica, looks like all caps, the first 100 customers to spend $80 or more will get a free sample bottle of Hypnautica. They're tiny bottles, but you do not need much. Like if you've never done CBD before, do like 2 drops. And by the end of that little bottle, you'll know if you like it. It's quite lovely. And buy, the cookies or the brownies or the gummies for a friend. So also, if you want to, I'd love to support Chris because he's always supported me and my work. And if you want to support my work, listen to the show with the commercials. That's fine. Share it. That would be great. I took some time off for my mom. I put up some reruns, which were great. I did curate them and we, produce them and stuff. But so I kind of have some making up to do. So if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the Monica Perez show, also that's a new show basically. And if you could give it a review, that would be great. Or just subscribe, share it. And if you want to go the extra mile and not hear the commercials, sign up for the premium feed, which is only on iTunes at the moment, but it's $4.99, which is, as I've said, the price of a newspaper. And I would appreciate it. So on to the last segment of the show. So this was, I want to shout out to Dean and Inversionism who tweeted this to me. And by the way, Twitter was founded on this day in 2006. So 18 years ago. I've been on Twitter since 2011. Okay. This clip is Obama in April of 2022, I believe. Seriously? I don't have it here. He is talking to the Stanford Cyber Policy Center. And I think it was April 2022. The Stanford Cyber Policy Center. So these are students at Stanford who are probably going into tech, and Stanford is in Silicon Valley. And this speech, I'm playing it now because the last show we talked about Supreme Court ruling on social media and the government. We played this JFK speech where people think he was talking about like the secret elite, but what he was actually doing was asking the press for their help in suppressing information and in propagandizing people, scaremongering. It's really a shocker. So you can go back and listen to that if you want. It's my last show. It would have been March 19th, 2024. And this bears some similarities in that JFK was not talking about the cabal that runs the world. He was warning us against Russia. And Obama in this speech is also warning us against Russia, but instead of citing national security scares, he's citing racism scares. We should be afraid of Russia's racism because that's what drives them to manipulate our public square, I guess. Anyway, he goes through and explains at one point, this is the clip that Dean and Inversionism gave me. It's just like a 1-minute clip, but the clip I'm playing for you is like a 5-minute montage of a bunch of things that I thought was interesting. But he says he blames Russia, but of course it's them doing it to us. He talks about how conspiracy theories undermine the very belief in truth. And then game's over. Your society is disintegrated. And I've seen government documents that talk about how the US government targets societies that way to spread disinformation, to what was the name of it? Like dysfunctional segments of society to promote them. So I know our government does it to other people, and I have observed our government doing it to us. Now he's saying Putin's doing it, but if you hear it, you know it's us. But then he goes on and he says that Russia silences voices that Putin doesn't like because Putin's a racist. They're racist. And he says, but he doesn't say this, but I'm just saying, if you listen to the whole thing, this is what I got out of it. He's saying we have to silence voices that I don't like because I'm not a racist. You know, the ends justify the means for sure. So he goes through all of it. He even the ending, which I don't have here in this clip, but the ending of the JFK speech was, I don't even mind discord in the public square. It's good for us. And Obama ends with, I believe that the free, robust, sometimes antagonistic exchange of ideas produce better outcomes and a healthier society. That's the exact same sentiment JFK used to couch this call for censorship and propaganda. So without further ado, I will leave you with this. I'll be in the chat and we will put all of the show notes as well as how to actually listen to this whole thing, read the whole transcript at monicaperezshow.com. So let's see what we got here.
Authoritarian regimes and strongmen around the world, from China to Hungary, the Philippines, Brazil, have learned to conscript social media platforms to turn their own populations against groups they don't like, whether it's ethnic minorities, the LGBTQ community, journalists, political opponents. And of course, autocrats like Putin have used these platforms as a strategic weapon against democratic countries that they consider a threat. People like Putin, and Steve Bannon for that matter, understand it's not necessary for people to believe this information in order to weaken democratic institutions. You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage You just have to raise enough questions, spread enough dirt, plant enough conspiracy theorizing that citizens no longer know what to believe. Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game's won. And as Putin discovered leading up to the 2016 election, our own social media platforms are well designed to support such a mission, such a project. If consumers trust that new technology is doing right by them and is safe, they're more likely to use it. And if properly structured, regulation can promote competition and keep incumbents from freezing out new innovators. So a regulatory structure, a smart one, needs to be in place, designed in consultation with tech companies and experts and communities that are affected, including communities of color and others that sometimes are not well represented here in Silicon Valley, that will allow these companies to operate effectively while also slowing the spread of harmful content. In some cases, industry standards may replace or substitute for regulation, but regulation has to be part of the answer. Beyond that, tech companies need to be more transparent about how they operate. Now, so much of the conversation around disinformation is focused on what people post. The bigger issue is what content these platforms promote. Algorithms have evolved to the point where nobody on the outside of these companies can accurately predict what they'll do, unless they're really sophisticated and spend a lot of time tracking it, and sometimes even the people who build them aren't sure. And that's a problem. In a democracy, we can rightly expect companies to subject the design of their products and services to some level of scrutiny. At minimum, they should have to share that information with researchers and regulators who are charged with keeping the rest of us safe. In the same way, tech companies should be able to protect their intellectual property while also following certain safety standards that we as a country, not just them, have agreed are necessary for the greater good. And we've seen this as part of the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act that's being proposed by a bipartisan group of senators here in the United States. Doesn't happen often. And we've also seen it negotiated in Europe as part of the European Union's Digital Services Act. Again, we don't expect tech companies to solve all these problems on their own. There are folks in these companies and in this community who have shown extraordinary good faith in some cases, but that's not enough. We do expect these companies to affirm the importance of our democratic institutions, not dismiss them, and to work to find the right combination of regulation and industry standards that will make democracy stronger. And because companies recognize the often dangerous relationship between social media, nationalism, domestic hate groups, they do need to engage with vulnerable populations about how to put better safeguards in place to protect minority populations, ethnic populations, religious minorities, wherever they operate.